Good afternoon. My name is Jeffrey HERBST. I'm president of American Jewish University, and welcome to a very special conversation with former IDF spokesman Jonathan CONRICUS on a year of war on the battlefront and in the media. Today is obviously a very difficult day as we mark the one-year anniversary of the attack by Hamas, which eventually resulted in the murder of approximately 1,200 people and 250 taken hostage, as well as a year of war for Israel across 7 battlefronts. As a university, we thought it appropriate to mark this moment by furthering our mission to educate our entire audience about events in the Middle East. I would like first, however, given the gravity of the day, to read a poem by the Israeli poet Adai Kassar titled October. I'm not sure if I could go back to life this time, a morning run, bike trip, party without the face of the dead haunting me. I'm not sure if I could come back alive this time, an empty bed, a blanket colored red. What I am sure of, automatic weapons, fire and smoke, shattered windows, and a broken door, sirens going up and down, ashes and wreckage. The world is burning, and I am the flames, the hours blended, also the days. At night come the dreams and the mosquitoes to suck my skin. As from a hidden signal swirled around me, all night buzzed in the darkness, asked for my blood. All through the night the air stood still between me and the world, not going in and not coming out. In the morning I opened a window. The sun was shining in the sky, the silence filled the empty streets. I'm not sure if I could hear the silence that does not hide the disaster within. May their memories be for a blessing. Jonathan CONRICUS served in the Israeli Defense Forces for 24 years as a combat commander in Lebanon and the Gaza Strip. He was the international spokesman for the IDF from 2017 to 2021 and returned to that role for several months at the beginning of the current war. Jonathan, thank you for joining us on this very important and special day.
Thank you, Jeff. Thank you, Jeff. My honor to be here with you today.
Jonathan, where were you on October 7th?
Not a very dramatic story, similar to many other Israelis, I would say. In my home, Shabbat morning with my family, utterly surprised by the alarms that started blaring at 6:30. We live in central Israel, so we're not used to alarms, and my family is definitely not used to that kind of reality. We rushed down. We live on the 4th floor of an older building, which has only one bomb shelter, unlike newer apartments in Israel, where each family has their own bomb shelter. So we helped a few of the elderly neighbors to get down, got the door opened, rushed inside, and the first thing that I told my wife, as we had everybody in the shelter, at about 6:37 or 6:40, I saw the first clip of Hamas terrorists loaded on those white Toyota pickup trucks. This was from Sderot, and you could clearly see already then Hamas terrorists butchering Israeli civilians, firing wildly inside Sderot and killing people as they were driving around. And what I said to my wife was, as soon as the alarms stop, we'll have to go up, and I need your help because I don't remember where my uniform is, but we need to find it, and I need to iron it, press it, because we are going to war, and my role will be, of course, to help with being a spokesperson, and this is going to happen soon. Hamas has declared war on Israel, and we're going to have to deal with it. Of course, at 6:40 a.m., I had absolutely no clue, nobody had, of the size of the catastrophe that was before us. I couldn't even imagine that at the end of the day, we would count more than 1,200 dead and 252 abducted. I would never have imagined that Hamas would have been able to do so. Such was the thinking, such was the assessments in Israel. And for a very short period of time in the morning, I had a short dilemma what to do. To drive down south, I have a motorcycle, so to drive down south real fast and engage in combat against terrorists, or to start speaking in the media. What eventually settled that dilemma for me was the fact that I didn't have my personal pistol, my firearm with me. It had been I deposited it at a police station a few years ago and didn't have it back. And I thought that it wouldn't be very responsible for me to drive down south and engage with heavily armed enemies without even a weapon. So I started fighting the other fight, the one in the media. And then for the coming 3 months, I was during the night shifts at the IDF spokesperson unit. I'm sure that that's how many people who may be on this call saw me, as an IDF spokesperson in English, trying to deliver the messages of the IDF to the international audiences. There were nights where I did 30 or 40 interviews, all of them top-tier interviews, American mostly, but also Canadian and Australian, and a bit South African. And then there were other IDF spokespeople who did the day shift and handled BBC and Sky and others, but I focused mostly on the American networks.
I'll be asking Jonathan questions for about 20-25 minutes, and then we welcome questions from you, the audience. Please start submitting your questions via the Q&A function at the bottom of the screen, and we'll try to get to as many as possible. Jonathan, it's been a long year. Thinking back to the early days after October 7th and what you were thinking, what you were imagining, and confronting the reality today, what's been your biggest surprises?
Well, there's been many surprises. The first and the most horrible one was, of course, the fact that Hamas surprised us to the extent that they did, both a strategic and a tactical surprise. In short, I would say that I think we totally misunderstood Hamas's strategic intentions, and we definitely underestimated their military capabilities. This led to complacency, lack of preparation, lack of troops, and a very slow and totally insignificant response from the IDF on the ground. This is what enabled the horrible catastrophe of October 7. And that was, of course, the biggest and most challenging surprise to deal with. I'll share that on a personal level, it was a very challenging time. For the first time in my adult life, I was ashamed, or I felt shame to be part of the IDF. 24 years up until then, I had served from private to lieutenant colonel, never felt anything but absolute pride in the organization, in wearing the uniform, in representing it at the UN or in international media. But after October the 7th, based on the looks and the feedback from Israeli civilians, very, very challenging times. And I think this will take many years for the IDF to rectify. So that's surprise number one. Pleasant surprise, which I'm very happy that holds still today, is how beautiful, strong, resilient, composed, and magnificent the people of Israel is. Those who live in Israel and the people of Israel who live outside of Israel. And I've had the good opportunity to meet so many amazing Israelis that have been called up for duty or volunteered, or have just been volunteering as civilians across all spectrums of civilian life. People that have been helping other Israelis, evacuees, people that have been picking fruit at farms where families were evacuated from, or helping wounded. There's endless examples of the beauty and the strength and the togetherness and camaraderie, brotherhood of the people of Israel. And since January, I've been out speaking in Jewish communities and non-Jewish but supportive communities around the world, where I've seen this tremendous outpouring of help, care, love, joy, and money, and means that Jews around the world have been contributing to Israel. So a positive surprise has been the positive spirit of love and togetherness and brotherhood that these horrible attacks has awakened in Israel, and it's something that I hope we will hold on to and continue, and will set political differences and opinions aside and focus on the most important things and defending ourselves and continuing to nourish our country and our land for future prosperity for future generations. Last thing that I'll say about surprises has been so far, and I say this very carefully, knowing that this can be proven wrong in just a few seconds, but so far, I am underwhelmed and surprised by the relatively limited combat capabilities of Hezbollah. Before the war, the assessment was that Hezbollah is tremendously powerful, equipped with almost 200,000 rockets that are capable of being fired towards Israel at a rate of about 4,500 per day. That would blanket all of Israel with incoming rockets and missiles. And this was the biggest, of course, concern, and also the cross-border attack plans that Hezbollah had based on the Radwan units. Eventually, they decided, Hezbollah, not to launch attacks on the 7th or the 8th of October out of their own strategic considerations, which I'm happy that they made. But they have tried to fire rockets, and they fired many rockets, about 9,500 rockets so far, but not to the effect that we had anticipated in Israel. And I am positively surprised by the level of intelligence and by the level of execution of operations by the IDF when it comes to dealing with Hezbollah. And it's such a tremendous difference between how the IDF is systematically dismantling Hezbollah, its command and control, its rocket firing capabilities, its ground forces, its commanders, basically all different parts, its logistics, all parts of Hezbollah are being targeted, which is, of course, not something that is a coincidence. It's many, many years of hard work collecting intelligence and preparing for D-Day, which, of course, is a very sad difference to how the situation was in southern Israel. There's a bit of noise now because we have an alarm. They're firing rockets just as I spoke. So there'll be a bit of noise. You'll see my family members run down to shelter, but I'll continue here. Hold on just a second. I'll black the screen for a second, and then I'll have the video, I'll have the audio on, and hopefully things will be all right.
Well, Jonathan, that's...
You can cue this, the next question soon. Yeah. I don't know if you have the Homefront alert app on your phone. Many Jews around the world have it. So if you check, you can see that the alarms are sounding in central Israel. A few hours ago, it was a missile fired from Yemen that sent, I'd say, 3 or 4 million Israelis into bomb shelters. It was successfully intercepted. I hope that will be the fate of whatever happens now, but we will continue with this live stream.
Well, Jonathan, that's tremendously moving. And of course, we're most concerned about you and your family. And both grateful and the stark reality of what you and Israelis have to deal with is brought home to our audience in a very poignant way. So we thank you and we're grateful, and we hope all is well, of course. Jonathan,
thank you.
Maybe we could explore the dichotomy you just talked about, the extraordinary Israeli operations against Hezbollah, the pagers, the walkie-talkies, killing Nasrallah, identifying where he was and killing him. And then on the other hand, the failure to understand it all, Hamas. There was a quite moving article in the Wall Street Journal over the weekend, which you undoubtedly saw, about Israeli soldiers, most of them women, who had tried to warn about some kind of impending Hamas action. They were ignored, and many of them were killed or taken hostage. So how to understand this extraordinary operational capacity and intelligence in the north compared to not understanding what was going on next door in Gaza?
Yeah, I alluded to it in the beginning of, a total misreading and misunderstanding of their strategic intentions. For years, the political echelon and the defense establishment, prime minister, minister of defense, and the entire military establishment basically had this group think, which essentially said, and in Hebrew we refer to this as hakonseptia, or the paradigm of thought, or the concept of thought, which basically said Hamas has gone a bit soft. They are not into hardcore jihad anymore. They want to govern the Gaza Strip, but not much more than that. And what they care about is consolidating power in Gaza and having good, more or less, living conditions for the people who live there so that they can continue to control Gaza. We didn't listen to speeches. We didn't listen to warnings. We convinced ourselves otherwise when it came to what Hamas was saying, what their leaders were saying. And at the end of the day, I think we knowingly, willingly misled ourselves into believing that Hamas is more talk, more bark than bite, and that they aren't really serious about all this jihad and the destruction of Israel and killing all the Jews and ending the occupation. Ending the occupation, when a Hamas guy says ending the occupation, that means ending Israel. It's not occupation, it's ending the existence of Israel because from their perspective, all of what they call Palestine, what I call Eretz Israel, and what Jews have been calling Eretz Israel for thousands of years, even before Hamas was an invented idea, that is their goal. And we convinced ourselves otherwise. And as the article in the Wall Street Journal puts and clarifies, I have one comment about that article. It really disturbed me that even the Wall Street Journal doesn't use the word terrorist. They refer to it as militants, and I really expected better of the Wall Street Journal. But otherwise, solid reporting. It's been covered in Israeli media extensively over the last year. The whole tremendous failure of the entire intel system to correctly see and interpret, not probably seeing, but interpreting the intelligence that was present and vivid and just under our noses, and turning that into relevant assessment and informing decision makers that something was afoot. And that happened very little and totally too late, not enough time. But then there were other issues as well in Israel, the amount of troops, the readiness, the deployment, the amount of tanks, and many other things that sadly contributed to our worst day in history, in Israeli history, when so many civilians were massacred by invading terrorists. Since then, I should say, I think that, and I suppose most people will agree with me, that the IDF has started to tidy up much better. It is facing, I think, the most difficult workload of any military around the world, fighting on 3 active fronts on the ground, holding a defense along 2 others, and fighting air wars in 3 other sectors. So fighting on the ground, Gaza, Judea and Samaria, Lebanon, holding defense lines along the Golan border with Syria and along the border with Jordan, where there's growing instability, and conducting air defense operations against incoming missiles from Yemen, Iraq, Syria, and of course, Iran. So quite the workload for a small country with very limited resources, material resources. But I think all in all, Jews around the world can be very proud if we draw an imaginary line, the October 8th and onwards. I think the IDF has been operating quite tremendously, especially against Hezbollah. There's, of course, a lot to learn and to improve tremendously from how the IDF failed on October the 7th.
Jonathan, let me ask you about one part of that, though. And the layperson would say, how can you identify and kill Nasrallah, pagers, the other operations, but the IDF still can't find the rest of the hostages, even though it has operational control over most of Gaza.
Yeah, that's a very relevant question. It goes back to having years of investment in building intel infrastructure. The pager operation was planned and executed years ago. There's a very good story out in the Washington Post for those of you who are interested in the details by Joby Warwick and Suad Mehnet. They've got good sources and very interesting, a lot of details of how that happened. Brilliant, nothing short of brilliant, but it took many years of planning and execution and a lot of funds and a lot of high quality personnel. Otherwise, in terms of Hezbollah, in addition to that, IDF and Mossad have been tracking the whereabouts of Hassan Nasrallah for years. And it was only a political decision not to strike him. And Israel has been very serious in investing significant resources in collecting intelligence, analyzing the intelligence, and turning intelligence into targets when it comes to Hezbollah. All of their rocket launchers, all of their logistic facilities, all of their storage bunkers, the location of their commanders, their underground bunkers, the location of the strategic weapons, all of that was mapped before October 7, and the IDF was very serious about being prepared for war against Hezbollah. Less serious, obviously, sadly, about Gaza, did not have the infrastructure, the intel infrastructure, the human source intelligence infrastructure that Israel has with regards to Hezbollah, and was also lacking in many other components. And I'll say personally, I have asked myself that question as well, because it is about 40 kilometers from where I am. That's where Gaza is. And there are Israeli communities just on the border. And it is extremely, extremely frustrating that we, the very powerful IDF, have not been able to get full home from so many months, so almost a year now of captivity in Gaza.
Let me ask you the Petraeus question. How do you think this ends in Gaza?
It ends with an Israeli victory, and it ends with Hamas defeated militarily and politically. So far, I think Hamas is down but not out in layman's terms. Most of its military capabilities have been successfully degraded, and they have only marginal capabilities left. However, until another government, another ruling party is introduced in Gaza and is able to take control over the Gaza Strip, the second objective of the war, which is to dismantle Hamas's political control over Gaza, will not be achieved. And that's where we are now. There's been a lot of developments when it comes to dismantling Hamas's military capabilities, but not yet politically. The military has been doing its part, and it is for the government, for the diplomatic level, to conduct statesman work, statecraft, and to create the conditions, international conditions, in order to bring a political change in Gaza. That has not happened yet. I am sure that it will happen, but a lot depends on elections in the US, the political situation in Israel, and the ability of Israel to build a coalition of willing countries in the Middle East under American leadership and with tremendous American support in order to really change reality in Gaza. To be honest, I think we're talking about years ahead. I think that the conflict in Gaza will take years to settle at the military level. I think that the IDF will have no other option. From a pure military point of view, politics aside, from a pure military point of view, IDF will have no other option but to go in, stay in, and control the Gaza Strip militarily until Hamas is eradicated militarily and replaced by other Palestinian leadership. I hope it's not a corrupt one. I hope it's not a leadership that will promote terrorism. I hope it's a leadership that will be future and prosperity oriented and not jihad-oriented and terror-supporting like the Palestinian Authority is. And it'll take time for that to happen. Then will come a very long process of influencing the education system and the mosque or the religious system in Gaza. These two are the two most important drivers of terrorism and extremism in Gaza. That will have to be dealt with. And the measure of ultimate strategic success for Israel with regards to Hamas, it's not how fast we can destroy their rockets and how many commanders we've killed and when we will kill Sinwar. These are simple military metrics. It will be how long will it take for Israel to replace the terror-promoting UNRWA school system in Gaza? How long will it take for Israel to control and influence and de-radicalize the mosques and the religious teaching system in Gaza? And how quick can Gaza be rebuilt from a physical perspective? Until these three things happen, de-radicalization of the education and the religious system and a physical rebuilding of Gaza, Gaza will be in ruins and Gazans will suffer and we will have instability and low-level fighting. And to be honest, I think we're talking about quite a few years ahead. This will continue to bleed and exist. So anybody who thought that this would be a quick military victory and then some benign alien force would drop in and change the reality with the snap of a finger, not going to happen. This is the Middle East. We're talking about some of the most backward populations in the world, and that is other Arabs who say that about Gazans. We're talking about some of the most extremist and radicalized populations in the world, where Hamas ruled for about 17 years and implemented a very strict interpretation of Islamic law. And that needs to be undone, and it'll take a lot of time.
Jonathan, I want to get to questions from our audience, and thank you, audience, for submitting them, and please keep submitting them. Let me ask you about the media war in the media, which you've been a participant in. You've, I'm sure, drawn a lot of conclusions about coverage of Israel over the years. How would you rate the coverage by the media of this war since October 7th? Have you been surprised? Did it go pretty much as you expected? How would you evaluate it?
You know, at the end of the day of October the 7th, I kind of took a moment to think, and I tweeted that, remember how this started. It started with an unprovoked attack by an Iranian-funded terror organization against innocent civilians, and it will end by Israel defeating that threat. And I felt the urge to tweet that because I had a sense of how this was going to evolve. There would be a strong Israeli response. We would go into Gaza, and then the very short-lived, rare moment of global sympathy towards Israel, which was to be expected, would end, and the regular beaten media coverage, tried and tested and proved media coverage of bashing Israel would be back at normal, where whatever happens, Israel is to be blamed for defending itself, for fighting back, for causing civilian casualties on the other side, for not doing enough to getting the hostages back, or doing too much to get the hostages back, or killing terrorists that might have been important allegedly to bring hostages. And whatever happened, there was a lot of focus on, or blame on Israel. I must say, I haven't been surprised. I've been disappointed. And the latest op-ed I wrote, I grew up in Sweden and I speak a southern dialect of Swedish and can almost write coherently. I wrote an op-ed in a Swedish newspaper titled "My Disappointment with Sweden, Swedish Society and Swedish Media." And I can extend that by and large to international media, although Swedish media is in a category of its own when it comes to hostility towards Israel. But I think that I am just disappointed by by and large, and I'm generalizing and paraphrasing and bundling everybody together, and of course, not all journalists and editors and networks are like this, but by and large, what I've been disappointed with is lazy reporting, lazy editing, giving Hamas total carte blanche, free pass on everything, no responsibility for Palestinians, no responsibility for the Palestinian Authority or Hamas, no accountability for any of their actions and the consequences that ensued. And I would say the usual blaming of Israel for everything that happened on October 7th and onwards. A lot of politics, a lot of domestic Israeli politics that get mixed up in international coverage, which I think is very unique only to Israel. I don't see so many other countries, their internal politics being exposed and emphasized that much. And I would say there's a few networks that have been positive and professional, tough but fair. But by and large, if I were to rank it, I would say British media shines dark, if that makes sense, but really in bad shape. BBC and Sky, it's almost as if they have a editorial policy to be nasty towards Israel, to be nasty and unfair towards Israeli interviewees, and to be nice, cuddly, fluffy, and soft towards Palestinians, even if it is Hamas or some of the worst perpetrators of war crimes. And then American networks, it varies, reporter and program, etc. But by and large, to summarize, I don't think Israel is getting a fair shake. I think that the reporting is biased against Israel. It's a totally uneven playing field. And my only regret is that even in this lopsided playing field with corrupt referees and an away crowd, a hostile away crowd, we still could be and should be doing better in presenting our case and doing our communications better as a state, more coherent, with a strategy, with resources, with personnel, and with better social media. Basically, everything should be better. And it's because of Israeli political decisions that it isn't happening.
Jonathan, let me ask you one last question from me, and then we'll go to the audience about social media, and a particular question about social media, which is a lot of talk about, as the U.S. intelligence establishment say, malign actors in social media, Iran, Russia, China in particular. How much of what you see, and it's a vast, obviously, environment, how much of what you see on social media around the war around Israel do you think is driven by Iran in particular?
Iran has significant capabilities to conduct what we call info operations or psychological warfare or influence operations. They've developed these over the years. They couple these operations with the more classic human intelligence and espionage, which they are active. They constantly try to bribe and otherwise get Israelis to collaborate with Iran against Israel. They've been very active in trying to make inroads into minority communities in Israel, Arabs, Bedouins, Druze, etc., preying on sense of that they're outsiders and disenfranchised. So far, not very successfully, but the Iranians keep on trying. And they've, of course, made attempts also to assassinate Israeli leaders and former senior security personnel directly from Iran, but also indirectly through Hezbollah. Now, regarding social media, they are definitely present in social media in Hebrew, wherever they can stoke indecision, infighting, and wherever they can take advantage of existing political, social, religious tensions within Israeli society. There's a lot of evidence of Iranian fingerprints in social media in Israel, and they try to do influence operations in Israel. I would say that compared to Russia and China, they're still very small. Russia and China, as far as I know, I'm no expert on social media and influence operations, but according to the reports I've read, Russia and China are much more focused on the US and on Europe than they are on Israel. But nevertheless, there are definitely signs of it. But, you know, it's also just about the way that social media works. Social media works, the algorithms, they look for strong emotions. They look for an emotional content that is then sensational and gets views and gets a result. And that's how the algorithm works. So when there's pictures of Palestinian kids or a child that was killed in a bombing, never mind if the picture was taken from Syria or from Afghanistan, but someone says, this is a picture of what the Israelis just did in Gaza, and it's very graphic and gruesome, that generates exactly what the algorithms of social media networks want. And that is why they get tremendous reach and influence. And numbers-wise, it is an overwhelming deficit for anybody who is Israeli or tries to help the Israeli narrative. We are outmanned by, I think, a factor of 1 to between 900 and 1,000.
Large number of people in the audience want to know, how does Israel win the PR battle, or at least do better?
By deciding that it is a matter of national importance and a priority. And that hasn't been made. For political reasons, for the last 15, 20 years, what we've seen is a steady decline and erosion in Israel's public affairs capabilities. Some call it hasbara. I don't like the term so much, but that is what's been going on. And there's a lot to change and to improve. First and foremost, there needs to be significant, tremendous budget increases in an investment in our public relations that will allow the most talented and capable people to be in it, because Zionism and patriotism only carries a certain way. Eventually, you have to pay good people good salaries in order to have them do the job, which is very demanding and unforgiving. Then there needs to be a very clear government directive on what the strategy is and to prioritize international media and public affairs. Another thing that needs to happen is for a small percentage of Israel's national intelligence capabilities be dedicated directly to winning hearts and minds and doing public affairs on behalf of the state of Israel. Israel has tremendous intel resources, and it should use a fraction of it dedicated systematically towards this. And of course, Israel should have order, make order politically. There's a lot of ministries today that exist for political reasons that kind of do public relations, but don't really do it very, very well at all. And I'm being polite because this is recorded. And there are other ministries who should be handling it, like the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, which have been gutted of their budget, gutted of their personnel, and really void of real capabilities. And perhaps the people who are there are not infused with the right amount of fighting spirit in order to fight that battle. I draw a lot of comfort from looking at the tremendously talented Israelis and Jews around the world who are engaged in the information war. There's a lot of very talented people who, out of their own time, are volunteering and writing and filming and tweeting and posting and doing all sorts of kinds in order to push back against anti-Semitism, push back against hatred against Israel, and to fight the battle of the narratives. We know that Israel is not in shortage of talented people who can accomplish amazing things. Israel has proven that time and time again, whenever there's been a need, and whenever Israel has focused on a topic, Israel has proved that it has tremendously talented people, and it is capable of doing the unimaginable. And I think that this is a challenge of that magnitude. What Israel needs is the political leadership to say that this is important. And from then on, I have faith that Israel can make a significant effort and improve its situation. Can we turn the Irish into being fair and unbiased towards Israel? Probably not, because these are generations and generations of anti-Semites and Israel haters that have been fomenting very vile points of view against Israel and Jews for hundreds of years. That won't change in a short period of time, but we can definitely do better in very important audiences, specifically the US and a few other Western countries, where we should and do much better.
Jonathan, we're almost out of time, and I'm very conscious that your family wants and needs you. So let me ask you one last question from our audience, which is, we saw divisions in Israeli society before October 7th around judicial reform, other issues. We've seen divisions even after October 7th on what priority should be assigned to the hostages, and also about Haredi enlistment. Do you think, several different members of the audience pose this question in related ways, do you think these divisions can be overcome, or do they represent just seismic challenges in society?
They are. I'm no political analyst. This is just a simple layman's opinion. I think that the challenges are profound. They're very big. They're substantial. The tensions within Israeli society are indeed strong, but I am positive. I just saw the very beautiful and heartwarming ceremony that the families organized for the commemorating the 7th of October. Beautiful, inclusive, intelligent and elegant and very, very sad and moving ceremony that they organized without a single politician being part of it, not government and not opposition. And the message was one of unity, of the need to come together, to address differences, and of course to respect differences and different points of view, but to find common ground and to find solutions. Because at the end of the day, as the cliche goes, we have no other country. En lanu eretz acheret. We have this country and this country alone. So I have faith in Am Yisrael. I have faith in the wisdom of Am Yisrael, and I have faith in the decisions that will be made. And hopefully our politicians will reflect that spirit of togetherness. Politicians will be politicians, as they are all over the world. They will seek to exploit divisions. They will seek to exploit fear and use that for their political gains. Sadly, I think that's reality. But I think that one of the good outcomes of October 7 is that there is, in my mind, in my subjective understanding, more of an understanding within Israeli society that we have to do more in order to be together. And as the last thing, I would say, I see this reflected beautifully around the world, Jewish communities around the world that are coming together, getting organized, fighting, pushing back against anti-Semitism that they face in their communities or in their countries, and supporting Israel. And I think that's a great thing that I'm very happy for. It's sad that we had to go through the horrible October 7 in order to trigger that, but at least there's a silver lining here. And hopefully this will last long after the war is over, and we will have defeated our enemies.
Jonathan CONRICUS, under missile warning from Central Israel, thank you so much. Thank you for taking time out. Thank you for taking time out from being with your family. We hope for better days ahead. So thank you for joining us.
Am
And
Yisrael
thank
Chai.
you. And thank you to you, the audience, for joining us for another American Jewish University program. We hope that you'll go to our website, www.aju.edu often to see the many exciting programs coming ahead. So on this momentous and very sad day, thank you very much for joining us.